What's going on, guys? Victor here with some new content, and I'm going to be going over one of the fights that was supposed to be going down at UFC 260. I'm talking about the co-headliner, Brian Ortega versus Alexander Volkanovski. Obviously, that fight has to be put on hold because Alexander Volkanovski did test positive for the coronavirus. So obviously, we don't know when that fight is going to go down. It might go down UFC 262, which is most likely going to be the next date just because of how stacked UFC 261 is already, and there's never been a UFC card with 4 title fights on it. Obviously, for me, 3 is enough. If you add 4 in there, then the whole entire pay per view is probably going to end by 3 a.m., and obviously, the UFC is obliged by ESPN to end the pay per view at a certain time. So if they go over the limit, they won't be paid any more money for that pay per view. So obviously, the fight is going to go down UFC 262 if I am a guessing man. But I'm going to just analyze the fight a little bit. I'm going to go over it. I'm going to preview it just to see who would win in this fight, who's got the advantages, who's got the disadvantages. Obviously, both these fighters are very, very similar. Brian Ortega is 30. Alexander Volkanovski is 32 years old. Alexander Volkanovski is 5'5". Brian Ortega is 5'7". And Alexander Volkanovski has a 2.5 inch reach advantage. I believe it's 71.5 to 69 for Brian Ortega. So obviously Volkanovski is going to go in there with the reach advantage, even though a lot of people tend to believe that he is a smaller individual, that he's a smaller guy. But it's going to be a very interesting matchup to see what happens just because Alexander Volkanovski is coming off of that controversial win against Max Holloway. He got dropped about 3 times, but he was able to get some takedowns in the later rounds to really secure his win, even though I do believe that Max Holloway did get screwed over by the judges, but that's why you don't leave your fate into the hands of the judges because you never know when they're going to have a good day. You never know when they're going to have a bad day. Brian Ortega has been on fire lately. Basically, his last loss was against Max Holloway. Max Holloway being the only individual to hand at Brian Ortega his sole loss on his record. Obviously, Brian Ortega is kind of looking past Alexander Volkanovski because if he does win the title, he wants to run it back immediately with Max Holloway, and that was just an obliteration. Ortega was eating a lot of punches, and he was taking a lot of damage to the point where the fight had to be stopped because of his health and medical reasons. One of his eyes were so swollen to the point where he couldn't really see out of it, and we all know if one of your eyes is completely shut, you're at a disadvantage, and the doctor is going to wipe it off no matter what. Now, Brian Ortega did come back, and he did fight a couple months ago against the Korean Zombie, and he was able to beat him all 5 rounds. It was an obliteration. It was a masterclass, and Brian Ortega has become extremely, extremely technical now, and he's just kind of creating his own little painting as he goes, as he fights inside of the octagon. He's more creative. He's more technical. He's smarter. Obviously, he's not going in there to engage in a fist fight like he used to, just because of the new team that he's with. He fired every single one of his coaches except for his BJJ coach after his loss to Max Holloway, which was definitely the best move for him because he does need some new looks, he needed some new looks, especially on the feet. He obviously has everything on the ground. He just needed to brush up on the boxing and on the Muay Thai. And definitely when it comes to the wrestling as well, with the clinching and the takedowns and trying to get your opponent on the ground, and it would just take care of it after that. So let's begin with the BJJ. I'm obviously going to give that to Brian Ortega because his BJJ is very unmatched with the majority of his opponents. Obviously, Alexander Volkanovski is good on the ground as well. I've never seen Alexander Volkanovski submitted by anyone, and I've never really seen him in trouble against anyone either. So I'd love to see how Brian Ortega implements his BJJ against Volkanovski and see how Volkanovski retaliates, how he responds, how his defense is going to be against Brian Ortega in those sequences on the ground, whether Ortega is going to be working from the full mount, the half mount, the side mount, north-south position. You never know. Brian Ortega is a phenom on the ground. When it comes to the wrestling, you got to give it to Volkanovski. When Volkanovski has got his hands on both of your legs, he's going to take you down. He took down Max Holloway a couple times during their last fight, and he's taken down a good amount of people during his career with his wrestling. I believe he did used to be a wrestler back in the day, back in high school and everything like that. And he's very, very powerful as well. When it comes to the strength, obviously you gotta give it to Alexander Volkanovski as well over Brian Ortega, just because Volkanovski used to weigh about 200 and something pounds. I believe probably around 230 pounds, I believe. Very, very big, very, very thick back in the day. He used to be a professional rugby player for Australia, so he's no stranger when it comes to the aspect of things getting rough. He's not a stranger to the aspect of getting hit extremely hard by bigger individuals. And he could be able to take a punch, and he could definitely endure some damage as well. So obviously, strength is going to have to go into Volkanovski's favor when it comes to the speed. I give that to Ortega because Ortega is very fast, and Ortega can get you in some very complicated positions when he gets on you, and he can be able to evade a lot of strikes, and he can be able to dish him out at the same times. When his boxing is going, his combinations are pretty fluid. They're nice. They're down to the point as well. And pretty much Ortega can be able to glide in there. Volkanovski's also got some speed in there, but I'm not going to say that he's faster than Ortega because Ortega is fast, and Ortega can move in some unorthodox ways sometimes if you think about it. And when it comes to the striking aspect, I'm gonna say both these guys are equal because both these guys have some very good boxing, some very good striking, and I can't give the advantage to one of those guys. I'd have to say they're tied because when their boxing is on point, they can have their opponents in some very bad positions. And both of these individuals have finished fights before with their boxing, with their Muay Thai and kickboxing, you name it. Obviously, the last time I saw Volkanovski knock someone out was Chad Mendez a couple years ago, and it was a thunderous knockout. Both fighters are going at it, and it was a very good fight, even though it ended very, very shortly. And I can't remember the last time that Brian Ortega finished someone on the feet, but he did have a back and forth war against Renato Moicano. When Moicano was in featherweight, both those guys were going back and forth, but Ortega did eat a lot of punches. And if there's one thing about Volkanovski is that he doesn't really eat that many punches as well. So if I have to say who endures more damage and who likes to take a lot of damage, I'm definitely got to say Ortega on that aspect because he has taken a lot of damage in the past. He took a lot of damage against Holloway. He took a lot of damage against Renato Moicano. And he's taken a lot of damage against other opponents in the past as well. But he's been taking less and less damage recently, which is very, very good. When you look at Volkanovski fight, he doesn't really get into a lot of bad positions. He also likes to evade, and he also likes to use his movement a lot. Obviously, the head movement, the body movement, the footwork, just so he doesn't take that much damage. So obviously, both these fighters have very good footwork, but obviously I'm going to take the one fighter that doesn't take as much damage as Volkanovski because I've never seen him in a very, very bad position in the past. And obviously, you got to think about it. A lot of the muscle on Volkanovski is with his legs. Those legs are basically his tree trunks. And if he decides to implement the plan against Brian Ortega that he implemented against Max Holloway on that first fight, where he wanted to utilize a lot of his leg kicks, they're definitely going to do a lot of damage to Brian Ortega. And if Brian Ortega really wants to win this fight, he has to get this fight on the ground. He has to overwhelm Alexander Volkanovski at all costs. Obviously, both these guys' striking accolades are pretty much equal. So obviously, I feel like they're both going to kind of cancel each other out on the feet. So whoever wins on the ground is most likely going to win the fight. And both these fighters are really well conditioned as well. You barely ever see them get tired whatsoever. So it's going to be a battle of attrition towards the very end of the fight. I believe there's not going to be a finish. I think it's going to go to the full 5 rounds. If it does go to the full 5 rounds, I believe Alexander Volkanovski is going to take it, even though Brian Ortega has been looking very, very well lately. But Volkanovski's got a chip on his shoulder. He wants to show the world that his last win was no fluke, and that he wants to go in here and dominate Brian Ortega, who is a former title challenger and trying to win gold for not only himself, but for the country of Mexico, for his family, and for everybody back in the hood. Obviously, Brian Ortega used to be I wouldn't say a really bad kid, but he used to hang out with the wrong crowd. Some of his friends ended up dying on the streets of Los Angeles just because of how rough things were back then, how rough things still are. Changed his life, got into MMA, and here he is about to get his second title shot, whenever it's going to be, UFC 262, UFC 263, whenever. But it's going to be a great fight. I hope you guys enjoy it. And whoever you guys think is going to win, Volkanovski or Ortega, let me know in the comment sections. Let me know if I did something wrong. I appreciate you guys when you tell me I do something wrong. It only makes me better in the future. So, appreciate you guys watching this video. Stay safe, stay blessed. Enjoy the fights this weekend coming up. UFC 260, even though it's a little bit more diluted than it was before the cancellation of the co-main event. Later, guys.